let's go into the article. So I have an article here that I'm going to be sharing. And this is out of the Good News website, goodnewsnetwork.org. So if you guys are looking to add some good news to your life, then you guys can go to Good News Network. And so this says implantable artificial kidney that frees patients from dialysis on horizons after successful trial. So let's get into it. So this is what it is, as you guys can see. So as a kidney dialysis patient, I kind of know a little bit. So of course you can see both the kidneys, the left and right kidney up here. As you see, the red line is the arteries, one of the primary arteries, and then the primary vein structures. If you see, then you have an arterial line that goes within the artificial kidney, and then you have an out. It's kind of like a in and an out. So the out goes into the venous or veins part of the arteries. And then you also have a waste output that goes straight into the bladder. So this is basically how the kidneys work, where it actually has an arterial and a venous that goes input, cleans the blood, restores the pH balance, and then it also has an out. But then it also is connected to the bladder, which all the impurities that are extracted through the blood intravenously, as well as excess fluid that is directed also to the bladder for you to execute it as well. So that's how basically it works. So we're going to get into it. It says sufferers of living with kidney failure can also look forward to a future without dialysis or long waits for an organ transplant. Oops, this is way too small. So thanks from the University of California in San Francisco that produced an implantable device that mimics the organ's daily functions. So this is important. It says the first clinical trials show that kidney cells housed within the device called a bioreactor can work quietly in the background like a pacemaker and does not trigger the recipient's immune system to go on the attack, a major stumbling block for patients who need to take the harsh immunity suppressing drugs after receiving donor transplants. More than 500,000 people in the United States receive dialysis several times a week, like myself, whereby their blood is filtered by a machine. And just to let you guys know, the machine, the dialysis machine, whether it's through Braun, Fresenius, or other companies, what they do is they use typically a tube-like structure. And that tube-like structure is called a dialyzer. And the dialyzer, when you look into it, is actually a series of hundreds of, maybe if not 1,000, little itty bitty string-like tubes. So basically the blood goes through those tubes. And what happens is a reverse osmosis that goes on with inside the dialyzer. And so the dialyzer actually pulls out the impurities as well as excess fluid. And then through that dialysate flow, it actually pulls it out and then it executes it down the drain, right? So basically doing the job of the kidney for you at a particular location that you have to go to. And depending on your kidney function, depending on how, bad it is, sometimes you may go, I've seen people go 1 time a week to dialysis, 2 times a week. Average is typically 3 times a week, like myself. I've seen one young lady who is going 5 times a week. And so it just depends on the patient. It depends on the KT over V. It depends on the creatinine levels, the BUN. It depends on these things as well. But, according to labs, so they have particular labs in order to get those numbers. But the thing is that that's what happens. Now, with somebody like me, the process of going to dialysis is I have to go to dialysis 3 times a week. And depending on the type of access you have, a lot of times when people start dialysis, they start off with what we call a perm cath. So a perm cath is basically the tube that has an arterial and venous. So one that comes, to the arteries, one goes to the venous, and then it's either, a lot of times it's placed first in your chest. For some people, depending on the way their body composition is, sometimes it's placed in their groin. So that's what they have. And so blood goes out of the arterial, and then it goes to the dialyzer, and then it comes back in through the venous. Now, this process is circulated many times, depending on the amount of blood flow, which is the amount of how fast the blood actually goes through the dialyzer. So typically here in Florida, the average for perm cath is about 300, upwards of 350 blood flow. So that's what that is, versus if you have a graft or an arterial venous fistula or AV fistula. So that's what happens with them. Now, I've had catheters, many in the past. I actually have the scars to prove it. I'm not going to show you my chest now. I even have one in my neck one time. But there's also people who have what we call grafts as well as fistulas. And these are, a graft is basically an artificial type of tubing that connects the artery and vein together, but it's through artificial tubing so that you can get stuck with a needle instead, which means that it heals over, which is even better, which prevents less infections. The fistula is a natural artery and vein fused together in order to be able to have, instead, a fistula, which I have, and now I have what's called a graft, a hero graft, which connects directly to my heart. So I get stuck with needles every other day, 3 times a week. And these needles are not small. And so I'm saying all that in the process to let you guys know that if something like this were to come up, and if it were to pass human trials and prove to be successful, and if I were to get something like this, instead of having to get a kidney transplant, the process to get a transplant would be way shorter. Meaning I wouldn't have to try to find a donor or wait for a cadaver. I wouldn't have to wait for somebody to die in order for me to receive a kidney. On top of that, I don't have to worry about the immunosuppressive drugs, medications that they give me, which cost thousands of dollars per year. And so then I would have to be at risk also of this immunosuppressive drugs or anti-rejection drugs, as many people know them, for having this. So this would basically be like almost like an implant that acts as a kidney. Basically, it's taking the dialysis machine and shrinking it down many times and just putting it inside your body. So that is something that is amazing to me, is that they will be able to do that. And then I would no longer have to get stuck by 15 gauge needles, twice in an arm, 3 times a week. I wouldn't have to worry about preserving my dialysis access. And then if it stops working, I have to go to the hospital or go to an outpatient center to get it repaired or to get it fixed. Right? I don't have to worry about these things. And so this is what's important, because this medical breakthrough, this technological breakthrough would help so many thousands of people who are on kidney dialysis now. So then you don't have to sit there and wait for a kidney transplant, and you don't have to be subject to big pharma with the immunosuppressive drugs at all. So that's the process, just a little bit, to let you guys know how things work. Now, it says only about 20,000 people receive them each year. An implantable artificial kidney would be a boon. It says device developed by the university's kidney project has been successfully implanted and tested in pigs for 7 days. A next step will be a month-long trial. first in animals, then in humans. It says the scientists plan to fill the bioreactor with an additional kidney cells that can mimic all the functions, such as balancing the body's fluids and releasing hormones to regulate blood pressure, and then a full artificial kidney will be born. Now, just to let you guys know, when it comes to also regulating the blood pressure, one of the things that a lot of people don't know is that the kidneys actually secrete a particular hormone that actually activates your bone marrow into producing red blood cells. So typically, a lot of people who are on kidney dialysis also have anemia. So instead of also having to get that medication for anemia, then if you have these cells that automatically secrete this hormone to stimulate our red blood cells, then that also gets rid of the need for these different types of medications that help us to prevent us from having anemia. So that's another point as well. And yes, I get that medication. Gosh, how often? I think I get that medication. I think it's like twice a month, something like that. But yes. So it says the bio-artificial kidney will make treatment for kidney disease more effective and also much more tolerable and comfortable. So this is from Dr. Shuva Roy, a bioengineering professor at UCSF School of Pharmacy. He says, we need to prove that a functional bioreactor will not require immunosuppressant drugs. And we did. We had no complications and can now iterate up, reaching for the whole panel of kidney functions at the human scale. In a published study in the journal Nature Communications, the team details how the engineered bioreactor can connect directly to blood vessels and veins, allowing the passage of nutrients and oxygen, much like a transplanted kidney would. It says silicon membranes keep the kidney cells inside the bioreactor safe from attack by the recipient's immune cells. The team used a type of kidney cell called the proximal tubular cell, which regulates water and salt, as a test case. Co-author H. David Humes, MD, from the University of Michigan, had previously used these cells to help dialysis patients in intensive care units with life-saving results. So they tracked the data from the kidney cell inside the bioreactor and the recipient animals for 7 days after transplantation, and both did well. So we're going to see how this works. And then I also have a few thoughts regarding this. And I'm going to be tying, the efforts of Big Pharma as well as the system, the medical system, along with this. So be prepared because I have a few thoughts as well. So I'll see you guys on the other side.
People living with kidney failure can soon look forward to a future without dialysis or an endless wait for a transplant organ. Combining continuous treatment with total mobility, the implantable bioartificial kidney will give patients back their health, freedom, and quality of life. The compact device will replicate many functions of healthy kidneys and will not require immunosuppression drugs. The bioartificial kidney combines a mechanical hemofilter to remove toxins from blood and a bioreactor containing engineered renal tubule cells to maintain water volume, electrolyte balance, and metabolic functions. Highly efficient membranes constructed from semiconductor silicon wafers enable filtration without requiring pumps or electrical power, while protecting the renal cells from rejection by the patient's immune system. The biocompatible device attaches to the circulatory system and removes toxins to the bladder as waste. After a decade of engineering development to refine the hemofilter and bioreactor components, preclinical prototypes of the implantable bioartificial kidney have been successfully created. Cleanroom microfabrication processes have been established to reliably produce high-quality silicon membranes. Tissue culture protocols have also been optimized to reproducibly grow renal tubule cells and maintain their function. The silicone membranes were mounted in polycarbonate housing to construct hemofilters, and in similar fashion, bioreactors were assembled to immunoprotect the renal tubule cells. The hemofilter and bioreactor components were then connected to create bioartificial kidney prototypes for benchtop and preclinical testing. In proof-of-concept experiments, the hemofilter operated under blood pressure alone, without systemic anticoagulation, while the renal...
So just to some of you that were asking questions like electrical power, it is purely by your blood pressure. So your blood flow and pressure are what power it. So basically, yeah, just to answer you guys' question, because I knew you guys were going to be asking that question, but it came up automatically in video. That's why I didn't stop to answer it yet.
Coagulation, while the renal cells in the bioreactor remained alive and healthy without immunosuppression. Further improvements will scale up the prototypes with additional silicone membranes and renal cells, creating clinical devices that can demonstrate sustained treatment of kidney failure in human trials. The implantable bioartificial kidney will provide the therapy and mobility patients need to move beyond the burdens of dialysis and organ shortage, and once again enjoy the freedoms of everyday life.
So basically, that's how it is. So is it exciting? Yes, I think it's very exciting. Now, here's a couple of thoughts that I had regarding this issue regarding this artificial kidney. First of all, capitalism breeds innovation. It's funny how capitalism breeds innovation, but that was developed in a public college. Interesting. Because it wasn't capitalism that bred it. It was actually public dollars that did the research and development for that. And so when people talk about capitalism breeding innovation, it didn't innovate. It didn't innovate shit in this regard. And it wouldn't have. You want to know why? Because there's more money in operating kidney transplants. Dialysis is huge business. Huge business. Billions of dollars a year. Right? You have Fresenius. You have DaVita. You have some that are nonprofit. But for the most part, dialysis is massive business. And so when you have these systems, along with Big Pharma, of course they want to keep the system in place. They don't want to innovate themselves out of existence. Capitalism only innovates as long as it knows that it can make more money off of something. If anything inches closer towards curing people, it says, nope, we can't, because we got to think about our shareholders. And so this is why it is important that it is through public institutions and public dollars that these things are innovated. Now, here's my concern. Some private institution or some private company is going to come in and go, oh, we would like to get the patent for that. Swipe the patent, make it illegal so that nobody else can have it. And then they're going to start trying to make money off of saying, we got an artificial kidney for you. All you have to do is pay us this hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then we can implant it in you. And then what they're going to try to do is they're going to try to circumvent some of the technology that the public institution implemented so that it can work at its optimal level. And it could be, well, we don't have to use all these different things. We can use this other piece because it's cheaper and we can make more profit. And then guess what? Then the artificial kidneys that were actually developed for humans will actually start working less. And so then you may have to start getting them changed out more often. Oh, your artificial kidney is not really working out. You need to swap it out for a new one. When in reality, when it was originally formulated and built by a public institution, it was to last the entire lifetime of the person that's using it. You can't tell me that's not how capitalism works. You can't tell me that's how business people and shareholders think, because I know that's how they think. And so this is exactly how it would go. And this is exactly why, and I see Roger coming in the comments, but this is why, look, when it comes to private equity, they should not be involved anywhere near the ownership or development or buying the patent for this. And in fact, I think the information for this should be completely open source. Completely open source. Shared by all of, for all people in medicine. And in fact, I am one of those people who think that we should have a nationalized healthcare system so that they can have a bunch of these at the ready that are developed by public institutions and that are given to people who need these, who are on kidney dialysis. I was born with a disease called nephrotic syndrome. It is a juvenile kidney disease that affects the glomerulus within inside your kidneys, the glomerular filtration units. And in that, which means that my kidneys do not filter out of the impurities like it should. And so I would need something like this. And this would also save a ton of money medically. Because do you know what's involved in having to at least even just find somebody for a kidney transplant, a donor? Not only would that person have to have a blood type match, tissue type match, oral exam, mental evaluation, physical exam. And then on top of it, a lot of hospitals also require you that you have a fund where you raise money and then they keep that fund, you have to keep that fund replenished. And on top of that, you have to have 2 insurances. 2, not 1, 2. So for people like me that are within the hair's breadth above poverty, according to the United States government, I have Medicare and Medicaid. You have to have 2. And then on top of it, once the transplant is done, which range between ranging between I think $150,000 to $250,000 for that operation. Then on top of that, you have to purchase the immunosuppressive medications in order to keep your kidney in place. And if it fails, you go back on dialysis. So this kind of circumvents a lot. And a lot of these companies are going to be like, yeah, we really don't want this to happen. Or if they do want it to happen, they want to make as much money off of it as possible. This is why the system needs to be changed. Look, insulin, right? Developed by a doctor, patent was sold for $1 for everybody to have freely, right? But that's not what happened. Now insulin's marked up like 300%. I'm sorry, like 100% or 1,000% in some cases. Takes $3 to $6 to make a vial of insulin. They're charging you $300 just for a bottle, just for a vial of insulin. They could charge you $30 for a vial of insulin. That would be a 10-time markup. But no, hundreds and hundreds of dollars. So it's the same thing. And there's a ton of Black people on dialysis. Ton. Most of the people at my dialysis center are Black. There's maybe a handful of white people. And a lot of us are, as far as class goes, we're at the bottom of the hierarchy, class-wise. I've known some homeless dialysis patients. The only time that they really get a good rest is when they come to dialysis and go to sleep. So this is my concern, is with the system, not necessarily the actual device itself. And just imagine how much better we could do if we actually had more funding to our public institutions. If all of our research and innovation and development actually went to our public institutions even more. Imagine if we actually propped up our public education system so that we can make it so that they can develop things even better. Imagine if we didn't have the school to prison pipeline. You may have a student out there that has the type of mind that can think of some amazing medical innovation systems that could actually help us. But instead, they're serving in juvie. Or instead, they're too poor and they're just working someplace because the system failed them. They're working some low-wage job somewhere. And then on top of it, the jobs are low wage. So the point is that a systemic shift would actually change the game, even in regards to the health of people like myself. I wouldn't have to get into a waiting list for a transplant. A, B, and B positive blood types typically have a waiting list time of about 1 to 2 years. By the time you get into the negatives, it's about 4 years. If you're O negative, you got like 6-year waiting list. Imagine how many people you could take off the waiting list just through having that. Just imagine the quality of life that people would improve. I'd be able to do more live streams on my channel. So yes, is this good news? Yes, but with a caution, because you and I both know the medical device manufacturers, big pharma, and hospital systems too, they're going to get their grubby little greedy hands on it out in a privatized system. When in reality, it should be nationalized. It should all be nationalized. So, what do you guys think about this new technological innovation? And I've had people for like 4 years send me articles regarding new artificial kidney. And they're like, oh, look, you got a new artificial kidney. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. But now it's getting serious. They're really pushing up the innovation. So